In 2001, Borderlands 1 was unveiled to the public. Initially, the trailer seemed quite underwhelming, with very little to distinguish it from the gritty shooters that were typically released around that time. Come October of the same year, and Borderlands was released to the public with the updated art style and overall improved aesthetic. At first, people were skeptical of it, as a first-person looter shooter was a new thing back then. These loot grind games were usually reserved to action RPGs like Diablo, and as a fan of that genre, the game caught my eye as a young teenager. My enthusiasm was met with a game that received good reviews and launched one of my favourite game franchises ever. To me, and I assume to many others, the original seemed like a proof of concept. It did many things well, but nothing great. The shooting was fun, if a bit stiff, guns were interesting but very samey, locations were bland but served their purpose, and the world and characters had a good base to build upon, but didn't do much after that. Now, this isn't saying Borderlands 1 was a bad game. I actually really liked it, and only recently completed it again when it released on the PS4. And while the game certainly pales in comparison to Borderlands 2, the game is still enjoyable to play while listening to a podcast or playing with a group of friends. All in all, I loved the game, but I definitely left more to be desired. However, little did we know the influence that this game and its sequels would have on the gaming industry as a whole. Cue the release of Borderlands 2, a game I eagerly awaited to be released. I pre-ordered it with what little money I had, and the series catapulted into the limelight from there. I loaded the game up on my PC on launch day, played for 5 hours straight, and the power of my house tripped, which bricked my PC's hard drive and left me with a hard drive that needed to be wiped, something which took hours out of my playtime and was quite a hassle. The only relevance this has to the video is the fact that the game was so good that a bad experience like this hasn't changed my opinion or love for this game in the slightest. It's easily in the top 5 games I've ever played, and I logged a little less than 500 hours into the game across all platforms. On from this tangent, the game did everything I wanted it to do and more. Improved the graphics, made locations more varied, increased gun variety, and added way more unique weapons to farm. And the best thing about this game was the interesting cast of characters. Every single character, from Claptrap to Tiny Tina, had their own backstory, personality, and great sense of humour, all of which combined to make one of the most memorable cast of characters in a game series to date. Now, none of the story or characters had anything to do with the influence of this series. This series is so influential because of its gameplay loop. Before 2009, the thought of a looter shooter was so foreign, but Borderlands proved how well the formula can be done if used correctly. The Borderlands series created a formula that many games follow today. Seems to be no coincidence that Destiny began development after the release of Borderlands 1, and I certainly don't think that Destiny or The Division would have been so successful if the foundations were not laid down by Borderlands. The RPG gameplay loop, which was taken from action RPGs like Diablo and to a lesser extent MMOs like WoW, has translated perfectly into a first-person perspective in Borderlands 1, and later proved upon in Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel. Going from area to area, meeting new and interesting characters, all while getting new quests, loot, and leveling up, made for a very fun gaming experience which is seen in games like Destiny, Division, and Anthem. This isn't me saying that it's the most influential series of all time, or even close to it, but I think it is important to recognise how the series spawned a new wave of looter shooters which dominate the online space, both in player base and on Twitch and YouTube. Things did not look so good with the release of Borderlands, the pre-sequel in 2014. I was actually still unbelievably excited for the game, but I was certainly more reserved due to the fact that it was being developed by a different studio. I bought the game on launch, and like Borderlands 2 release day, I played it for multiple hours in one sitting and I was really enjoying it. It had some interesting characters and filled in the gaps of the story in a world that I was heavily invested in. New guns, new gameplay mechanic, and of course Australian accents made the game very fun to play. But the game very quickly fell from grace in my eyes when a couple of days later I went back to farm some legendary weapons, only to find that many of the unique enemies do not respawn naturally. I believe this has been patched out, or they have vending machines or something to farm legendaries, but the experience is not the same. While there is very little talk about the pre-sequel as it is a pretty similar game to Borderlands 2, I think there is a lesson Gearbox can learn from all 3 games. They must cater to their hardcore audience who want to farm legendaries and do raids and raid bosses. This is the same problem that was in Destiny, Anthem and The Division in the beginning of their life cycles. There was little to no endgame content, and it took quite some time to roll out new endgame quests. While some stuck around for it, many players stopped playing before they released this content. Now, looking forward with the meteoric success of the looter shooters like Destiny and The Division, there are plenty of things that I hope Borderlands 3 learns from these. If we take The Division 2, the looting aspect is extremely streamlined, and while you can spend a lot of time min-maxing your character with abilities and gear, you can also easily equip, sell, dismantle and upgrade gear for the more casual players. This game offers an easy to use inventory system that allows the more casual players just to play the game and has the depth and complexity to accommodate for the more hardcore min-maxing players. From Destiny, I hope Borderlands learn how to make fun and engaging raids or endgame content. While Chromorax and Terramorphous were passable endgame bosses, I think having a whole area dedicated to getting to them with plenty of hard enemies and loot would really extend the lifetime of this game for hardcore gamers. I hope Borderlands 3 learns from these games, but does not stray too far from its initial formula. From previews of Borderlands 3, they seem to have added a few extra bits like sliding and vaulting, which increase the variety of gameplay and traversal, which I think will help the series. However, I hope they don't take too much from persistent online games. While I would like constant updates with new content, I feel that this would come with less personality in quests and characters, because quest lines in The Division and Destiny aren't as interesting as the ones that would be found in Borderlands.